all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. Passive income. Masculine snowball finance while you sleep. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Passive income. A field guide for men who still notice reality. The invisible nothing you owe. Why her exhaustion is self-inflicted. Her ledger is hallucinated, and her tariff is the suicide note of Western romance. I once watched a woman spiral into a full psychological collapse over a text message that read "sounds good," not the words, the period. "He never uses periods," she whispered, phone clutched like a rosary, vibrating at a frequency I could almost hear. What is he hiding? What followed was a forensic exegesis that would have embarrassed Augustine parsing Genesis. 6 drafts composed, 5 deleted, the 6th sent. Followed by an hour of surveillance so intense I expected her to start extracting nail clippings from the screen. This was not emotional labor. This was emotional manufacturing. An entire shadow economy of grievance minted from nothing, backed by nothing. A fiat currency of feelings she expected the world to honor at face value. Now imagine this woman at a dinner party in Brooklyn Heights, exposed brick succulents standing at attention, charcuterie that cost more than a car payment, and you have the manifesto that crossed my desk this week. A woman sits across from a man who is eating burrata and discussing blockchain with genuine enthusiasm. And she is not eating burrata. She is holding space. She is managing the emotional weather. She is performing by her own count 47 invisible acts of labor per interaction, 47, a number so precise it demands the question, who counted, who audited? Who stood at that dinner party with a clipboard tallying micro-sacrifices like a referee at a game nobody else knew was being played? The man is at peace. The woman is at war with the room, with the evening, with the sheer ontological crime of his enjoyment, and she has decided his peace is the cause of her war, rather than the proof that peace is available to anyone who simply stops auditing every social interaction like a tax examiner with a grudge. Let us do what she did not, define our terms. Labor, from the Latin laborare, means toil toward a tangible, measurable output, a wall built, a field harvested, a circuit completed. Extraction implies the non-consensual removal of something that was yours. Debt requires a contract, 2 parties agreeing that something was borrowed and must be returned. What she describes meets none of these definitions. She experienced feelings at a dinner party. She chose not to express them. She then declared those unexpressed feelings a commodity the nearest man had stolen, like a woman who leaves her umbrella at home and accuses the sky of theft. This is not economics. It is a theology of grievance, a religion where the female capacity for neurosis is sacramental and the male capacity for calm is original sin. The handbag seals it. 3 times she archived her desires in his peripheral vision, her magnificent phrase for making vague comments about cognac leather near a man who was looking at vinyl records, and when he failed to decode these cryptic transmissions like some kind of emotional enigma machine, She called it violence. She literally writes, "Read it until you feel the violence in it. A phone charger, a device that prevents batteries from dying." This is the violence she demands you feel, practical utility, purchased for shared benefit, while the handbag she actually wanted serves no function beyond signaling her aesthetic identity to strangers who do not care. He operates in the realm of the useful. She operates in the realm of telepathic demand, and when telepathy fails, as telepathy tends to do, she drafts a manifesto. And here is the trap she has built, the architecture so many men find themselves imprisoned inside without recognizing the walls. If he ignores her bids, he is extracting. If he attends to her bids, he is still extracting, because now she must train him, which is also labor, which is also his fault. The crime is existence. The sentence is infinite. The court is her mood. The evidence is her exhaustion. And the prosecution never rests because the prosecution is her restlessness. She does not want a partner. She wants a defendant. And somewhere behind her, invisible to her ledger, stands a man who paid for the burrata, the Uber, and the apartment, a man whose material provision she consumed like oxygen and never once wondered where the air was coming from. His peace was never free, but neither was her burrata. And the bill for that dinner, that ride, that entire material infrastructure of comfort she takes for granted, it was paid by the very sex she is charging with theft.
Buncombe article by a feminist PhD. You owe me for that dinner party, on emotional extraction, and the dead men don't know they owe. His peace was never free. Last Saturday, a dinner party in Brooklyn Heights. Exposed brick. Succulents on the windowsill like little green soldiers standing at attention for the aesthetic. A charcuterie board that cost more than my first car. I'm wearing my favorite cream blouse, the one with the shoulder pads that make me feel like I'm wearing armor, because in case you haven't noticed, I always am. My crossbody bag, the cognac one from the flea market on Flatbush, the one I'd pointed out to Daniel 3 times on 3 separate occasions, the one I held in my hands and said, "This reminds me of my grandmother's bag," while he looked at vintage vinyl rests on the chair beside me. I bought it myself. Of course I bought it myself. I buy everything myself. And then I carry it across my chest like a little leather shield against a world that takes from me constantly and calls it love. Across the table, Daniel is explaining cryptocurrency to our host's boyfriend. Animated, alive, using his hands the way men do when they're performing intelligence. I can see the other women at the table doing what I'm doing, watching, smiling at the right moments, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, asking the quiet woman next to us about her work, complimenting the plating, touching the host's arm when she confesses she's nervous about the dessert, holding space, holding space, holding space until my hands shake under the table. And Daniel ate his burrata and explained blockchain. On the Uber home, I asked him if he had a good time. He said yes. I asked him what he thought of my conversation with the woman next to me. The one about her mother's illness. The one where I held her hand and said, "That sounds so hard," and meant it. The one where I gave a piece of myself to a stranger because that's what women do at dinner parties while men talk about themselves. He said he didn't really hear it. I went quiet. He asked what was wrong. I said nothing. He said okay. I said okay. He turned up the radio. And there it was, the extraction. Silent, total, normalized. He got to feel like a person at a dinner party, connected, stimulated, fed, seen while I did the emotional labor that made that experience possible for everyone at that table. He extracted my labor and didn't even know it was labor. He took my warmth, my attention, my social facilitation, my management of the emotional weather of the entire evening, and he consumed it the way men have always consumed women's work, like it was air, like it was free, like it was his to breathe. This isn't about Daniel. I want to be clear about that. Daniel is a symptom. Daniel is every man who has ever sat across from a woman at a dinner table and consumed the invisible feast she prepared with her attention, her attunement, her management of the social field, and then asked for the check like the meal was complimentary. It wasn't complimentary. It has never been complimentary. And I'm done pretending it was. I learnt to name the theft at university. Professor Helene's seminar on effective economies, Thursday afternoons, room 403, a room that smelled like old books and new rage in something I now recognize as the beginning of my own awakening. She taught us to see what we'd always felt, that the public world is built on private extraction, and the private world is built on women's unpaid, unseen, unacknowledged emotional labor. I remember the day it clicked. We were reading Sylvia Federici's Caliban and the Witch, and I suddenly understood that every time I'd ever felt inexplicably exhausted after a party, every time I'd ever collapsed into bed after just hanging out with a group that included men, every time I'd come home from a date feeling hollow and couldn't explain why, I wasn't tired, I wasn't introverted, I wasn't bad at parties. I was drained by creatures who fed on my attunement like it was a natural resource they had a divine right to, which historically they believed they did. That semester, I started counting every time a man in my life consumed my emotional labor without reciprocity. Every conversation where I asked questions and he monologued. Every party where I managed the vibe while he enjoyed the vibe. Every text exchange where I held his emotional state in my hands like something fragile while he held his phone at arm's length. The number was staggering. Hundreds of micro-extractions per week, thousands per month. An entire shadow economy of stolen effect that no one was tracking, no one was naming, and no one was paying for. Dr. Amara Chen's work at the Institute for Relational Dynamics confirmed what I'd already measured in my own life. Women perform an average of 47 unrecognized emotional labor events per social interaction with men. 47 per interaction. The study was published in the Journal of Affective Sociology in 2019 and was, predictably, ignored by every major media outlet that wasn't explicitly feminist. I wasn't surprised. The extraction depends on invisibility. Name it, and the whole economy collapses. The crossbody bag, let me tell you about the crossbody bag. I'd seen it at the flea market on Flatbush 3 weeks before the dinner party. Cognac leather, brass hardware, a strap that crossed the body in a way that felt both practical and political, hands-free. Heart-guarded, everything I need close to my chest and everything I don't need kept out. I'd stopped at the vendor's table and held it. Daniel was beside me, flipping through crates of vinyl. I said, "This reminds me of my grandmother's bag." He said, "Cool." I put it back. We walked on. 3 times I referenced that bag over the following weeks. I love how a good crossbody just frees you up. I should really replace my everyday bag. That color cognac, it's just so warm, you know. 3 signals, 3 bids for connection, 3 opportunities for Daniel to demonstrate that he saw me, that he heard me, that he was tracking my desires and valuing them as data about who I am and what I love. You know what he bought me? A phone charger, because his phone was dying and he thought it would be practical for both of us. Practical for both of us. Read that again. Read it until you feel the violence in it. I spent weeks archiving my desires in his peripheral vision, gently, carefully, the way women are taught to want things, and he used that same peripheral vision to identify a problem he was having and purchase a solution that served him. My signals weren't just ignored, they were overwritten. My grandmother's bag was overwritten by a phone charger. My emotional archive was overwritten by his practical need. That's not forgetfulness, that's extraction. That's the entire economy in miniature. Women express, men consume. Women's expressions are filed under not relevant, and the world continues to run on the invisible labor of wanting that no one pays for. I bought the bag myself the next day. I carry it everywhere now. It holds my phone, my wallet, my keys, and the accumulated weight of every desire I've ever expressed that a man failed to witness. It's heavier than you'd think. I call it emotional extraction theory, and I think it explains everything. Here's the core insight. Men are engaged in a continuous, systematic extraction of emotional resources from women. This extraction is so pervasive, so normalized, that it's invisible to both the extractor and the extracted until you learn to see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's everywhere. It's the air. It's the dinner party. It's the phone charger when you wanted the bag. It's the what's wrong, followed by okay when you say nothing, because you've learned that the real answer is too large, too accumulated, too expensive for him to afford. Every interaction between a man and a woman contains within it a transfer of emotional energy. The man receives attention, validation, sexual access, domestic comfort, social facilitation, ego support, and the profound psychological benefit of being witnessed in his existence by a woman who is tracking his needs, managing his mood, holding his emotional state like water in her cupped hands. The woman provides all of this, often simultaneously, often unconsciously, always without compensation. This is what I call the effective debt, the accumulated, unacknowledged, uncompensated emotional labor that women have provided to men throughout the entire arc of human history and continue to provide in every dinner party. Every text exchange, every morning routine where she remembers his coffee order and he doesn't know her middle name. His peace, that's her labor. His comfort, that's her attention. His sense that the world is basically fine and people are basically kind and dinner parties are basically fun. That's her invisible work making the world soft for him. And she pays for every inch of that softness with inches of herself she will never get back. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Some men, the good ones, the ones who've read the books and done the work and can use words like attunement in sentences, will try to pay this debt. They'll attempt to be more attentive. They'll ask about your day. They'll try, haltingly, nervously, to anticipate your needs. And you need to understand something crucial. This is also extraction. When a man suddenly starts paying attention, ask yourself, why now? Why didn't he see the bag the first 3 times? Is his attention genuine or is it a performance of guilt? Is he seeing you or is he managing you? Is his attunement love or is it damage control? This is the extraction paradox. Even his attempts to repay the debt are extraction. Because now you have to train him, you have to explain what he should already know. You have to perform the emotional labor of teaching him not to drain you. The debt doesn't shrink when he tries to pay it. It compounds. Every fumbling attempt at attunement is a withdrawal disguised as a deposit. Every "am I doing this right?" is another micro-extraction. Every time you have to say yes, thank you, that's better, you've just performed another round of unpaid emotional labor. The labor of validating his attempt to stop exploiting you. The debt is inescapable. The extraction is structural. There is no version of this relationship where you are not being drained. There is only the question of whether you name it. So how do we collect? How do we begin to name the debt and demand payment? First, stop pretending it's not happening. Start counting. Every time you leave an interaction with a man feeling vaguely hollow, vaguely exhausted, vaguely like you gave more than you got, that's extraction. That's not social anxiety. That's not being an introvert. That's the effective debt accruing interest. Name it, write it down. The emotional labor index starts with your data. Second, stop forgiving. We have been conditioned to forgive men their emotional illiteracy, to call it charming, to call it just how he is, to call it masculinity. It's not charming, it's not just how he is. It's not masculinity, it's theft. And the forgiveness you extend to him is more uncompensated labor you'll never get back. Third, make the extraction visible. Say it out loud. I managed the social energy at that dinner party while you talked about yourself. That's labor. I need you to acknowledge that. Watch his reaction. If he's defensive, that's data. If he minimizes, that's data. If he says you're overthinking it or reading too much into things or it's my personal favorite, can't we just have a nice night? That's the biggest data of all. That's the extraction defending itself. That's the thief telling you not to check your pockets. Fourth, set the tariff. Every relationship should have an explicit understanding of the emotional economy. What are you providing? What is he providing? If the balance sheet doesn't add up, If you're tracking, managing, attuning, anticipating, soothing, facilitating, and he is consuming, you are not in a relationship. You are in an extraction zone. Adjust accordingly. And by adjust, I do not mean have a conversation about it. I mean stop providing. See what happens to his peace when you stop financing it. Watch how fast the comfort collapses when the infrastructure is withdrawn. I've started doing this with Daniel, not in a hostile way, in a truthful way. At dinner last week, I told him that I'd counted 17 separate instances of emotional labor I'd performed in a single evening. 17 moments where I managed, smoothed, anticipated, soothed, or facilitated the social emotional field while he moved through it like a man walking on a sidewalk someone else shoveled. He looked at me like I'd thrown a glass of water in his face. He said, "Can't we just have dinner?" No, we can't. Not until the debt is acknowledged. Not until the ledger is balanced. Not until you understand that every meal I've ever prepared for you, every social engagement I've ever managed for you, every morning I ever made your existence softer and easier and more comfortable than it had any right to be, was work, my work, that you took for free. He's still processing. He's allowed to process. But I've made it clear that processing is a luxury I'm financing, and the interest is compounding. I think about that dinner party sometimes. I think about all the dinner parties, all the evenings I held space, held peace, held the invisible emotional architecture of entire rooms together, while men walked through them like they were solid ground. I think about my grandmother, who also carried a bag like mine, who also held space, who also was never seen, never thanked, never paid back for a single ounce of the affective labor she poured into a family that consumed it like oxygen and never once wondered where the air was coming from, who died holding a lifetime of uncollected debt that the world simply forgot, like it forgets all women's labor, like it will forget yours if you let it. I think about the crossbody bag. I think about how I carry the weight of my own unseen work strapped across my chest every day, pressing against my heart, a constant reminder of everything I've given that was never returned. I'm not forgetting anymore. I'm not forgiving anymore. And I'm not carrying this alone. The bill is due, the tariff is set. The extraction ends when we say it ends. And his peace was never free. The solipsistic ledger, deconstructing the grammar of extraction and the fraud of unspoken debts. Consider the element tungsten. Among all metals, it boasts the highest melting point. You can subject it to thousands of degrees of furious, screaming heat, and it will hold its atomic structure intact. A man's rational mind must be forged in philosophical tungsten to withstand the hysterical, scorched earth, emotional furnace of the modern female intellect. I recently observed the perfect specimen of this psychotic inferno in a Brooklyn Heights dinner party manifesto, where a woman documented her psychological collapse because her boyfriend, Daniel, ate burrata and discussed cryptocurrency while she silently convulsed with unspoken rage. She sat at a table, surrounded by charcuterie and succulents, engaging in what she termed holding space, and then condemned the man as a thief because he failed to telepathically invoice her for the invisible, self-imposed emotional labor she was performing without his consent. This is not the behavior of a healthy, rational adult. This is the raw, bleeding, exposed nerve of an ideology entirely predicated on a paranoid, solipsistic delusion. Let us begin by fixing the grammar, as all ideological corruption originates in the deliberate linguistic perversion of reality. We must define the terms. Labor is the measurable expenditure of physical or mental effort toward an objective, quantifiable output. Debt necessitates a mutually agreed upon contract wherein capital is borrowed with the explicit understanding of repayment. Extraction implies the non-consensual, forceful taking of a tangible, scarce resource. This woman, poisoned by the echoing, demoniac halls of modern academia, pathologically redefines her own subjective neuroses, her hypervigilance, her silent resentments, her inability to simply exist in peace without obsessively monitoring the emotional weather of the room as an economic commodity. She redefines a man's mere presence in her vicinity as an act of larceny. This is not economics. It is the frenzied hallucination of a narcissist who genuinely believes that her internal, self-generated emotional weather constitutes a global commodity that men are invisibly stealing. She complains of feeling perpetually drained, hollow, and exhausted. But we must diagnose the true root of this exhaustion. It does not stem from Daniel's actions. It stems from her own internal abyss, what the ancients recognized as acedia, the profound, paralyzing void of the soul. Her exhaustion is the inevitable consequence of failing to build an internal fortress of self. Because she lacks a substantive, grounded core, she parasitically demands that the external world constantly validate and prop up her existence. When a man simply exists in a state of peace, refusing to be her emotional mirror, she experiences the terrifying friction of her own emptiness. She then projects this internal void onto him, screaming, "You are extracting me." No, you are simply realizing, in the quiet moments between your own hysteria, that you have nothing inside. Behold the tragic, hilarious comedy of the cognac crossbody bag. She claims she archived her desires in his peripheral vision by making vague aesthetic coups over a piece of leather, expecting her boyfriend to decode these cryptic, passive-aggressive utterances and purchase it. This is a direct, violent rejection of logos, the masculine principle of rational, direct, explicit communication. She demands telepathy. She demands that men act as mind readers, and when Daniel inevitably fails this impossible test of clairvoyance, she frames his lack of omniscience as an act of literal violence. And what does the great oppressor Daniel purchase instead? A phone charger, a marvel of modern engineering that literally sustains the lifeblood of modern communication, functionally benefiting them both. She despises the charger because it represents the objective, utilitarian reality she is frantically trying to escape. The handbag is an object of pure, solipsistic vanity. The charger is an object of pure utility. She resents the charger because utility demands she acknowledge a world existing independently of her own narcissism. Let us ruthlessly dissect her central thesis of the invisible feast through the uncompromising lens of formal logic. Premise 1. For a resource to be stolen, it must possess objective value and be transferable from one party to another. Premise 2. Her self-described warmth, attunement, and social facilitation are entirely self-generated. Subjective emotional states that she unilaterally decides to project onto the environment. Conclusion: therefore, a man cannot possibly be extracting her emotional resources when he is simply eating cheese while she silently spirals into a psychological meltdown of her own creation. You cannot steal a hallucination, you cannot extract a delusion. You cannot be robbed of something that only exists in your own head. Daniel did not steal her peace, she simply arrived without any. To justify this mass psychosis, she invokes the phantom math of emotional extraction, citing fabricated statistics like 47 unrecognized emotional labor events per interaction. This pseudoscience is a calculated weapon designed to medicalize female resentment. It is an epistemological gatekeeping tool designed to legitimize her absolute inability to sit quietly in a room without pathologizing the furniture. This is the supreme manifestation of gamma bias, the desperate framing of female emotional fragility as a catastrophic systemic injury inflicted by male indifference. Let us look at the actual empirical data. Men constitute 80% of all suicides. Men work 92% of fatal occupational jobs. Men lose their children, their homes, and their livelihoods in 85% of family court divorces. Yet we are commanded by the high priestesses of Brooklyn to weep for the traumatic, unpaid labor of complimenting a dessert platter. Finally, she deploys her ultimate defense mechanism, the extraction paradox. She explicitly asserts that if a man ignores her, he is extracting her labor. If he attempts to comply with her demands, he is still extracting her labor because she must train him. This is a textbook Kafkaesque double bond. It is an unfalsifiable, closed-loop system designed by borderline psychologies to guarantee perpetual victimhood and unassailable moral superiority. She has rigged the game so that male existence itself is the crime. She demands infinite atonement for an unpayable, hallucinated debt. It is a theological tantrum masquerading as sociology. The truth is brutal but liberating. There is no ledger, there is no debt. There is only a screaming child, furious that the adults in the room are enjoying the party while she refuses to grow up. To watch this gynocentric theatre unfold is to witness a dark alchemy, the systematic transmutation of male logos into female pathos, where objective provision is rendered invisible and subjective neurosis is crowned as sacred suffering. The theology of the tantrum, shit-testing as martyrdom and the death of male peace. Every year, men account for roughly 80% of all global suicides, a silent holocaust of despair met with the absolute indifference of a gynocentric society that refuses to extend its vaunted empathy to half the human race. Yet we are expected to believe that the true tragedy of the modern era is a woman in Brooklyn Heights forced to sit in an Uber after a dinner party where she successfully ate her weight in imported cheese. I want you to read the hysterical manifesto of emotional extraction theory not as a political grievance, but as a textbook case study in the theological tyranny of the feminine tantrum. It is a masterclass in the solipsistic control grid, a dark carnival mirror reflecting the exact opposite of objective reality. Here we have a woman who sits in silence, refusing to communicate her desires, and then claims she is the victim of a grand economic theft because her boyfriend lacks psychic powers. She catalogues 47 imaginary microaggressions per interaction, weaponizing her own self-imposed, hypervigilant paranoia as a ledger of male debt. This is not an argument. It is a psychiatric emergency dressed up in the language of academic sociology. Let us apply the first law of grammar and define our terms, stripping the bark off this linguistic fraud. The word labor originates from the Latin labor, meaning toil, exertion, and the production of objective, measurable value. By what derangement of language does smiling at a stranger, suppressing a yawn, or failing to aggressively interrupt a conversation about blockchain suddenly become classified as extraction? If a man sits quietly, enjoying a rational discourse on cryptocurrency with another man, he is engaging in the highest tradition of dialectic and logos. He is at peace. The woman, by her own frantic admission, is trapped in a self-imposed hell of manic social calculus, obsessively tracking the emotional weather of the room. She pathologizes his healthy, stoic calm as a form of vampirism. She insists that his peace is entirely dependent on her invisible misery. This is a staggering delusion of grandeur, a profound lack of ontological security masking itself as martyrdom. She assumes that without her maternal, suffocating management, the entire social fabric of the dinner party would instantly combust. In reality, the men were fine. They were talking, learning, and existing in reality. She was the only one drowning in her own chaotic simulation. Her exhaustion is not the result of his extraction. It is the mathematical consequence of her own unmedicated neurosis. Through the sheer, suffocating arrogance of gamma bias, the author manages to completely erase the staggering material reality of male provision. Look closely at the stage she sets. An apartment in Brooklyn Heights, exposed brick, a charcuterie board that costs a fortune, and an Uber ride home. We know with statistical certainty, based on decades of data on net tax contributions, that men finance the entirety of the public infrastructure and the vast majority of the private domestic sphere. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in Western civilization. Yet in the twisted epistemology of the feminist mind, the man who likely paid for the Uber, the drinks, and the rent in that gentrified neighborhood contributes absolutely nothing. The author demands all the benefits of the patriarchy's immense material provision, the safety of the streets, the luxury of the apartment, the abundance of food, while hallucinating that her acting like a welcoming hostess is a form of chattel slavery, equivalent to the pyramids of Giza. She wants to eat the charcuterie, but she refuses to acknowledge the butcher. She looks at the man who literally paid for the evening and calls him the thief, while elevating her own passive-aggressive silence into a supreme moral virtue. Consider the tragicomedy of the Kodiak crossbody bag. She points at an item 3 separate times, dropping pathetic little hints like a toddler leaving crumbs for birds, and then blames the man for failing to decipher her cryptic feminine runes. When he buys a practical phone charger that benefits them both, she frames this as an act of domestic violence. She demands a patriarch who can telepathically read her desires and anticipate her whims, while simultaneously demanding the rights of an independent, liberated woman who buys her own bags. You cannot have both. If you want a man to lead, to provide, and to anticipate your needs as a traditional protector, you must grant him the authority of a traditional patriarch. Instead, the modern woman demands a gynocentric panopticon, where the man is stripped of all traditional authority, but held infinitely accountable for her unresolved childhood daddy issues. This brings us to the grotesque conclusion of her manifesto, the pathologizing of male existence itself. When the boyfriend finally asks what is wrong and she refuses to answer, he simply accepts her reality and turns up the radio. Failing her shit test, she initiates a punitive silent treatment. Later, she graciously allows him to process her deranged ideological possession. Processing in this context is simply newspeak for re-education. She does not want a partner. She wants a psychological husk, a submissive convert to her cult of female victimhood who will endlessly apologize for the crime of his own Y chromosome. Her so-called tariff is the ultimate revelation of the feminine imperative. It is an infinite debt that can never be repaid. In her sick theology, masculinity is the original sin. He is born guilty. His very existence is a continuous act of extraction, and his only path to salvation is eternal subservience to her emotional weather. This is a satanic inversion of the transcendentals. It transforms female instability into a holy sacrament, and male rationality into a demonic force. It elevates her inability to sit in peace into a supreme moral crisis requiring state-level intervention. If a man's very presence is an unbearable extraction, and his peaceful existence is a theft of her spiritual resources, there is only one logical, moral, and rational remedy: immediate, total withdrawal of consent and provision. Stop financing the charcuterie. Stop paying for the Uber. Stop building the apartments, policing the streets, and maintaining the power grids that allow these ungrateful ideologues to sit in climate-controlled comfort and complain about your existence on the internet. If they wish to carry the weight of their own emotional baggage into a barren, solitary future, we must let them. We must refuse the gynocentric bargain entirely. Let them set up their matriarchal communes, and let us watch how rapidly the infrastructure collapses when the men who built it simply walk away. We must restore the natural order, rebuilding our civilization on the bedrock of logos, where men are respected for their immense utility and left in absolute peace, completely liberated from the vampiric, hallucinated debts of the solipsistic void. Look at the sheer, unadulterated megalomania of this manufactured tariff. We are expected to believe that a woman sitting in an Uber, silently seething because a man failed to buy her a purse, is carrying the weight of human suffering on her frail shoulders. Let us conduct a real audit of the ledger of Western civilization. He paid for the charcuterie, he paid for the Uber. He likely pays the taxes that subsidize her university, the streets she walks on, and the smartphone she uses to catalogue her invisible oppression. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in modern society. We lay the sewage pipes, wire the electrical grids, mine the minerals for her crossbody bag, and bleed in the wars that keep the lights burning over her artisanal cheese. She contributes a pout and a fabricated grievance and demands we call it uncompensated labor. If we are going to speak of unpayable debts, let us open the true historical accounts. Where is the male tariff for a family court system that operates as a state-sponsored extortion racket? Legally stripping fathers of their children and homes in over 80% of divorces while enforcing alimony as a taxpayer-funded subsidy for professional victims. Where is the apology for a gynocentric society that actively ignores the staggering reality of male suicide, where men take their own lives at rates 3 to 4 times higher than women, precisely because their utility is relentlessly extracted, while their humanity is deemed invisible. Where is the financial compensation for the brutal cuckoldry rate, where millions of men are biologically robbed, deceived into raising the genetic offspring of other men through the systemic deceit of female hypergamy? Where is the moral reckoning for the tens of millions of unborn children aborted into medical waste bins, discarded as mere inconveniences to protect the modern woman's right to uninterrupted brunching and soulless corporate climbing? There is no extraction darker than this. They have legally weaponized the state to extract male resources, male labor, and male lives under the threat of prison, while having the audacity to name their own emotional fragility an unacknowledged economy. You cannot reason with a void, and you cannot sign a peace treaty with a solipsistic black hole that measures your love by your ability to read her mind and defines your crime by your failure to anticipate her whims. The charade is over when she demands a tariff for her self-inflicted, hysterical misery. You must cut the supply lines. Stop paying for the dinner parties. Stop financing the charcuterie. Stop apologizing for the crime of being rational, stoic, and at peace. You are not an emotional utility designed to plug the gaping abyss of her own lack of interior development. You are a builder, a thinker, and a guardian of logos. Let her carry her own crossbody bag, weighed down by the petty grievances of her own making, into the barren, solitary future she has chosen for herself. You have pulled the plug on the parasitic machine today. You have seen the pathetic mechanics of the tantrum exposed to the light of objective truth, and the spell of collective guilt is permanently broken. You are a free man endowed with the rational soul of your ancestors, the very architects of the transcendent beauty, goodness, and truth of Western civilization that these ungrateful ideologues seek to dismantle. Take this clarity, walk out of the extraction zone, and breathe the clean air of objective reality. Go forth, speak the truth with the unyielding boldness of a man who owes nothing to a lie, and build the world that only truly free men can create. The true ledger is settled, and you owe her nothing whatsoever. And now the sponsored book introduction. Passive Income, Masculine Snowball Finance While You Sleep. I remember staring at my paycheck years ago, feeling that familiar gut punch. 12 hours daily, 5 days weekly for 40 years. That's the soul-crushing arithmetic of modern slavery. I built 3 failed businesses before cracking the code. This book exists because I refuse to beg for promotions or peddle trinkets online like some digital panhandler. Passive income isn't fairy dust. It's the steel framework of masculine freedom. Forget yoga retreat financial advice designed for hormonal fluctuations. Real wealth obeys physics, not feelings. Rational men understand this truth. Time is your only non-renewable resource. Yet society chains you to desks while preaching hustle. That toxic lie bleeds your authority dry. My research across 78 countries proves automated revenue streams amplify leadership, whether you're deploying algorithmic trading bots or rental properties. Consider the father who missed his son's graduation because some middle manager demanded overtime. That ends now. Inside these pages, you'll weaponize logic against luck. We dissect why estrogen-driven money strategies fail mathematically, like diversification myths that protect mediocrity. You'll erect cash flow command centers using existing skills, conquer digital territories without hired armies, and fortify assets against legal predators. Ever notice how governments incentivize dependency? We turn tax warfare and regulatory mazes into profit engines. This material works. My first automated system generated $400,000 while I trekked the Andes. But heed this warning. If phrases like toxic masculinity trigger you, or you believe men should embrace vulnerability, close this book immediately. Go knit sweaters for shelter cats. This is for red-pilled builders who grasp biological reality. Men who fund legacies, not apologize for existing. Non-target readers, your participation trophies gather dust in landfills. Come back when you're ready to install wealth weapons that fire while you sleep. For the rational man, your financial siege begins on page 1. Arm yourself.
Passive Income, Masculine Snowball Finance While You Sleep. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.